Hello, and welcome to episode number 269 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I am joined by Mark, the green tank.
Hey.
Neelan, the orange tank.
Hello.
And myself, as always, the red tank. Hello, friends. Today, on episode number 269, we're going to talk to you about the games we've been playing, and then we are going to rank, BGBOB style, the top 15 games where you roll dice. There is an emphasis and underline on the word roll. There are reasons for that.
So upset about that. So upset about that,
Yes.
I gotta say.
Very clear. We just said, we underlined, we capitalized, all caps, you know, that PowerPoint setting where there's the little a and the big letter, all caps. We use that mode so you don't have to hold shift and or push caps lock. We use that setting.
Big A.
But before we do that, we're going to talk about some games that we have been playing. Mark is going to talk to us about a game. And if you skip one of the words in it, Lord of the Rings adventure book. Mark, this is a board game podcast.
It's the adventure book game, Kellen, as I told you clearly before we started recording.
After Mark talks to us about reading, I will take us through the South Terminus, a small box game, and a co-op Hanabi-like game called Beyond Baker Street. And Neelan is going to finish out that section with a game called Defence of the Procyon III.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, if we're making up the species involved, who can say how you pronounce them?
Can I tell you about something that happened to me today, board game related?
That's good. That's not book related.
No, that'll be coming up later as soon as I start talking about my reading adventures. No.
Yeah.
So, we're in the middle of March, and so I turned the TV on, and many people would expect that when I turn the TV on in March, I'm going to have March Madness, right? I'm the sports guy. I'm going to have basketball on. But I've got to admit here in front of you both that one of my guilty pleasures in terms of something I like to watch, just have in the background, I always think it's good for a laugh, good for easy watching, is Golden Girls, okay? I'm a fan of Golden Girls. I watch it often at night. I think the writing holds up. Not going to get into it now. But anyway, so this happens to be on. Kellen is dying to say something.
I mean, you watch it alone, or are you with the door open, or are you sometimes with the door closed?
Okay. Anyhow, so had it on last night as I... anyway, yeah, I shouldn't have followed that up. Anyway, so this morning I turn on TV, and the Golden Girls is on the Hallmark Channel. Okay, I'm not a fan of the Hallmark Channel in general, but turned it on. And the movie that they had on, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Hallmark Channel movies. They are like, they're all like love stories, and they all have like zero conflict, no friction in the movie at all. Anyway, the movie that was on was board game themed. There were two board game designers who were falling in love. And I've got to tell you, it was like one of the most excruciating yet interesting things I've ever seen. Now, first of all, I got to say, like, I'm happy that the Hallmark Channel has a board game movie. It's called The Game of Love, as you guys are furiously looking up. Anyhow, so I like the idea that Hallmark decides in their next movie, they crank out like 70 movies a year, but they did one based on board games. That's cool. It's growing the hobby in whatever way it does. But my God, like the central board game in this movie was a roll and move game called Love Life or something like that. But this was going to be like the breakthrough game. And it's in like a Parker Brothers, like old style, like Monopoly sized box. And again, it's roll and move, and it was just ridiculous. It's funny that they sprinkled in some board game jargon throughout the course of the movie, but it was just hilarious to see, like, the final scene is, like, this game that they've been working together as this couple who didn't like each other at the beginning, and now they've fallen in love. They're pitching it to the board of this board game company, and these people are in suits, and all these people are in this board game cafe playing this Love Life game. And just seeing the crescendo where people are like loving the game, and the board is overwhelmed by the positive response in this board game cafe, and they're going to like publish 1 million units of it or something, was hilarious. I was wondering like what the game would be like if there'd be some interesting mechanism or something, but it was just like a standard roll.
There's any degree of like consultation or anything like that.
No, not at all.
You might think, as I did, that this was perhaps a Hallmark movie made in the 90s or earlier. It was made this year.
Yes, this is fresh off the press.
Brand new.
What if I was the consultant for the movie? So that was about the Hallmark Channel.
Yep.
So now we can translate to you telling us about your adventure book time.
Sure.
Your nerd book.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, after watching the movie, I decided to class it up and start reading. But no, I've been falling way behind on my solo game challenge that I mentioned a couple episodes back since putting down 11 a few months ago, the soccer game. So I decided to dive back into the single-player realm by playing the newly released, much like the Game of Love is newly released, the newly released Lord of the Rings adventure book game by Ravensburger, designed by Ryan Miller, Jason Little, and Marcus Ross. I guess Ryan Miller is the designer of the system that the game uses, which is the, unsurprisingly, adventure book system that, unbeknownst to me, was previously used twice, once in the Princess Bride adventure book game and the Wizard of Oz adventure book game. So going in, I was a little worried that I might not enjoy it, both because while I'm a very general surface level fan of Lord of the Rings, I'm not super deep into the mythos, and also because I'm generally wary of co-op games in general and of solo games that are co-op games with solo rules tacked on. As far as that second part, the Lord of the Rings adventure book game is a co-op game that has extremely simple solo rules. And when I say simple, I mean literally one single rule is all it takes to turn it from a co-op game to a solo game. So there's no problem on that front. But before I get to the former, let me talk about the game a bit. So the way this game works, and again, I imagine the other games in the system are similar, though I've never experienced them, is that there are 8 scenarios that you're trying to go through, unsurprisingly following the Lord of the Rings story chronologically. And each scenario is depicted in a different set of pages in a book. So if you want to do the first scenario, you open the book up to the first 2 pages, and laid out in front of you is the map you'll be using, your win conditions on one side, the special rules on the other, including any special loss conditions, and that particular scenario's setup. And you just follow the setup, placing whatever particular characters from the story are in that specific scenario, and then off you go. And from there, each scenario follows the same general turn structure. You move some pieces, you do some actions, you draw a couple cards into your hand, then you draw a story card, and you discard down to your hand size of 6. I'll skip the first 2 parts from now, the moving the pieces and doing the actions for the most part, because they're pretty standard co-op stuff. You'll often want to get your pieces in particular locations, and then completing mini quests, as they're called, by discarding certain suited cards from your hand. Think sort of like Pandemic style. I guess this is a good time to bring up the special suit of cards in the game, which are the One Ring cards. So for the most part, you'll be asked to discard, say, a red, a green, and a yellow card to complete a mission once you're at a certain place. But anytime you want to, you can discard a ring card out of your hands as a wild. But if you do, you gain corruption, and you move up this corruption track. Now, any one scenario has its particular loss condition, but if you ever max out on the corruption track, you lose the entire game, and then you have to start back from scenario 1. So it's a sort of like campaign-y thing where your corruption grows and grows from game to game, and it's something you have to keep an eye on in an overarching sense while trying to balance when you'll use it in each specific game or in any specific game. And while I wouldn't call the game too difficult so far, I've just completed game 3 of 8, I have found myself using the ring cards to complete scenarios when I felt pressed for time. And that time pressure comes from the story cards that I mentioned earlier that you're going to be flipping each turn. So after you've done all your actions, you're going to flip this story card. And they're all numbered from 1 to 15. They just flip them over and they show you a number from 1 to 15. And then you are going to take an action, usually which is going to advance the enemy based on that scenario card. So if I'm on the third scenario and I flip a 14, I look at that scenario, and 14 means some sort of particular way I'm going to advance the opposition. So like in the first scenario, a certain number might advance the Dark Riders, while in another scenario, it might advance the Balrog against Gandalf. And if that stack of story cards ever runs out, that's an immediate loss condition for that scenario. So as I've said, I played 3 of the missions so far, and while I haven't found any of them super challenging, though I just did squeak out a win in the third scenario using some corruption that I mentioned earlier, as is the case with many of these co-op versus system games, it does feel pretty contingent on the luck of the card draw, which I feel like I've been fortunate in so far. That said, the scenarios are so quick, and the rule set from scenario to scenario carries over to such an extent that you can blast through them in rapid succession. And the variety from mission to mission so far has been fun. Like, it's the same system from scenario to scenario, but the things that make it a little bit different have been fun, have been like keeping me engaged for sure. So I'm very happy I got this and have enjoyed my time with it, and fully intend to go through the entire thing, if only for, again, the quickness of each scenario and the minimal rules burden. I doubt that I'd ever play it again after I got through the whole thing, but this absolutely strikes me as a fantastic get if you've got people in your life who are perhaps aren't big-time board gamers, but who are Lord of the Rings fans. It's so easy to teach. The games don't drag, as I mentioned, and it's co-op, so you're all playing together. So I'd say fun for anyone looking for a quick solo/co-op experience, but a huge recommend if you have Lord of the Rings fans in your life. And so that is Lord of the Rings adventure book game by Ravensburger, designed by Ryan Miller, Jason Little, and Marcus Ross. Really love how each scenario is on a different page of the book. I've never experienced something like that. I know Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion does it, but I've never played it. But makes me interested, really, to check out the other games in the series. Not that I think they're going to be like fantastic experiences, but they're just so quick and so easy to learn that seems like a fun system.
Yeah. I always love that. It's very inviting to like turn the page and like sort of discover new art and like see what the new scenarios are about. So you're going to finish this?
Absolutely, 100%.
You're going to see it through?
100%. I mean, no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, I'm very intrigued. Like, it doesn't necessarily sound something I need to like jump out the door to get, but like I'm very intrigued from the prospect of having a light cooperative game, like you said, for someone that is more enthusiastic about Lord of the Rings than they are board games. Like,
this seems perfect for that for that group. Yeah,
that's neat.
If you get too much corruption, Mark, you can just have the eagles fly Frodo directly to Mordor. But the concept of you may have to start over all of it, that seems weird. Again, it actually looks quite charming. The cover is really pretty.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think if you got towards the end, like if you're in scenario 7 of 8 or 8 of 8, you would probably just take the loss in that scenario and do the scenario over rather than max your corruption out and take a loss on the entire thing. Like, I don't think, there's no reason that you'd be forced to do that.
This strikes me as very much absolutely, I will be saving my progress at every single chapter.
Right, and progress is saved very, very simply. Like, I didn't mention
We're going to save Scum, Nealon?
That's exactly what we're going to do.
Wow. All right, we're done talking about books. Now let's move on to board games. Nealon and I had a chance to play a couple of games together this weekend. Just wanted to highlight 2 of them. The first is another small box card game from Mr. John Cloudis. This is part of the Compass Archive, which is the North, the South, the East, the West. We've previously covered the North, I believe, in 2 different flavors and maybe one of the other ones. I know I've played most of them. This was the South Terminus, which is perhaps the slightest small box game I have ever played. Maybe. We were done with it in less than 30 minutes, including teaching, learning, playing the game. There are 5 different colors of cards with abilities on them, and they all have the same card back. And you're essentially choosing whether to put cards into your vault to score victory points at the end of the game, or to flip over your cards and attack the other player in a cumulative way, where the first card you flip over and put in front of you in your tableau hits them for 1 HP, the second one will hit them for 2, and so on and so forth. I would say that this is one of the most disappointing small box games I've played. I would say that it's strange in that it works perfectly for Nealon and I, which is like, we get the small box line. We know the terminology. Well, the terminology is made up new every time, so you don't know the terminology. But you get how it works, and you can kind of just start playing with the reference card. But I would say that flavor, that formula works well for us, but maybe won't work well for everyone. I think that it's hard to keep up with his output, even though I really like his output. So this isn't one that I would personally recommend. You know, I know there are a lot of people who want to have all of the directions aside from Kanye. I'm not sure for me that the South Terminus. But moving on to another game that we played that we liked, Beyond Baker Street. Mark, your favorite game, one of your favorite games, Hanabi, right?
Right.
Now imagine if Hanabi, instead of being themed beautifully, you know, fireworks, Japanese, was instead themed with a stupid theme.
Oh, wow. I've never thought of that.
Sherlock Holmes. In this game, which Nealon literally was quoting, I was reading quotes out of the rule book, and Nealon was reading them along with me because he knew them from his own just knowledge.
Uh-huh.
He surprised Christina and myself with how nerdy he is, that there's a mechanism in the game called the impossible, And, that doesn't really make sense. So there's a quote to explain it. And Neelan started quoting it back to us. This is probably like the number one quote of Sherlock Holmesdom, Neelan.
Yeah,
right?
you know what they say about the impossible, Mark, that once you eliminate it, no matter how improbable, what remains must be the truth.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I am familiar with that. I actually didn't know that came from a Sherlock Holmes story.
All right. Well, interesting. All right. So this game is similar to the hobby in that you can't look at your own cards. You're giving each other clues, and you have a time limit with which to try to navigate to the end. Instead of putting cards into 5 piles of ascending or descending, I can't remember, but who cares? Piles. In this game, there are 3 piles with different objectives, and that would be a suit and a value. And you are trying to hit exactly that amount without exceeding that amount. So you may need 12 books, which I'm sure has a thematic name, but I'm not going to learn what it is. And in the deck of evidence cards that everyone has is a 6 book, a 5 book, a 4 book, 3 book, a 2 book, a 1 book. There was probably a better way to say that. And you are trying to tell people clues in this exact same way you play Hanabi, which is you say, Neelan, you have 3 book cards, and you point out which ones are books. Or, Neelan, you have 2 5 cards, and you point out which ones those are. Every time you make a clue, Mr. Sherlock gets closer to solving the case without you, which is kind of scary. What makes this a little bit different feeling than Hanabi is that you don't need all of the cards. So in some cases, you are playing a card because you know that it can go on that pile. You know that it's not going to get you to the total, but it's going to get you near the total. So there's a little bit of fuzziness there. In addition to the 3 piles, you also have to, the aforementioned impossible, you have to discard and move 20 along a track called the impossible. That is about it. There are special player character powers that we did not play with. I found this quite good. I had always heard there are people who really strongly prefer it to Hanabi. I'm not sure I am one of them, but I thought it was just interesting enough, just slight enough that we had a good time. It's a little bit like Hanabi plus a little bit, made by Z-Man. It's going to be a good production, good art. Neelan, what did you think of Beyond Baker Street?
Yeah, I think like in subtotal, like the things that it trades from Hanabi being like the accessibility, right? For what's kind of a little bit more of a mathy puzzle, because you only have cards 1 through 6 of each of these suits, and sometimes you always have to hit very, very precise totals. So there's this element of like, okay, we've played the 4 onto this 13 pile, which means we now need to make 9, which means, okay, we probably have to use the 6 and the 3 because, there's not a 7 or a 2. Like, you have to really be thinking through the cards that you have available, and they're all going to be in circulation probably by the end of the round. So it's about finding the optimum use for cards of a specific color. Top of that, like the tension that it adds in terms of Holmes like creeping closer and closer towards the end, that felt really good to me. Like the sense that, well, we could give another clue, but then that's using up our valuable time. And that's, in the game that we played, what ends up biting us is we were 1 turn shy of beating the game before Holmes got there. And you start to think like, oh, if I'd given 1 less piece of information, if I'd done one thing slightly differently, it is a very real tension that I thought worked really well.
Yeah, Neelan us.
I very much did.
We didn't say it then, but I think now with some time we can say Neelan us. No, and that speaks to Neelan to maybe it's just a presentation thing versus a mechanical thing, but in Hanabi, at the end of the game, it's like, oh, we scored 18 or 19, and the rule book's like, you really did it, friends. Where this has 6 cases, which are essentially just escalating difficulty settings. But I liked the win or fail state that it provided. And it would be fun to try to sort of go through them in order and get to the last.
And felt like you were getting better at it. Because I tend to agree that hey, you won, but how well did you win is never a satisfying mechanic for me in a co-op game. So, as much as I love Hanabi, like I prefer a pure win-loss condition, absolutely.
Yep, so this is coming off my shelf of shame into my collection. It will stick around. Another game that I prepped that is coming off my shelf of shame and leaving the collection because I just don't even want to play it is 4 Gods, a real-time Carcassonne-esque game by the only designer of Archipelago, Christoph Bollinger. I am making my way through my goals this year. I said it was a goal to get through it. I learned how to play this one, and I said, nah, Real time is bad. Everyone knows that. So let us move on to Neelan. You played a game at the convention, Defense of the Procyon III. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think Procyon 3 is supposed to be a planet, but we'll go on with it. I played this at Dice Tower West. This was very kindly taught to me by Casey, Brain in a Jar. If you're not familiar with her channel, please check them out on Twitch and on TikTok. The premise for Defense of Procyon 3 is that it is a 2v2 heavily asymmetric war game. This is designed by David Turtzi and put out by PSC Games. It was a Kickstarter that just started to recently fulfill, and it is quite an elaborate production. You have a mess of minis in each of the 4 factions, and the way that the game is set up is that there's effectively a land battle that's happening between one player and their opponent, and a space battle happening between another player and their opponent. But you are in teams, so one land player allied with one space player versus their opposition, who are also allied. But each of those factions, every one of the 4 factions, is heavily asymmetric. We're talking sort of root levels of even the basic turn structure, and their action mechanics are completely different from one another. There are, in fact, 4 different rule books in this game that you pretty much just get handed, well, unless you have a teacher like Casey with you, and you're just expected to learn the process of your faction while the other players are learning theirs. I think to the game's credit, you don't really need to know anything about how the other players activate, because all you really need to know about them are what their health of their units are, what their victory points for defeating one of the units are, and kind of this broad sense of what their capabilities are, but otherwise you're mostly assessing the board state. One of the things I also thought was quite cool is while I sort of knew how I could help out my partner, in this case that was Daniel, Longtime Sunshine, I didn't know too much about what was going on in his board. I knew how I could help him out with my board, but not specifically how it was helping him. And as for Casey, who was Daniel's land opponent, I knew nothing about what was going on in her game. And the game sort of neatly allows you to compartmentalize the parts of it that matter to you while still feeling like you're connected to this greater whole. So broadly speaking, the victory conditions are quite varied. The human faction are trying to get to 42 victory points before the alien faction is able to defeat their base, basically. They can also get to the 42 victory point condition, but I suspect we're kind of in a War of the Rings scenario where that is a harder victory for the aliens versus the humans. So the humans are really just trying to hold out before the aliens complete their objective. I can really only speak for the way that my faction played, but I kind of found the puzzle of it quite cool. David Turtzi is, when he's firing on all cylinders, is really, really good at this. Very interesting, heavy Euro mechanisms, and I thought this was no exception. There's a mechanic where instead of actually even dealing damage to enemy ships, I sort of just had to spread amount of spores across the space map that would completely eliminate my enemy's shields, and then one attack would kill them. So it's almost a spatial puzzle more than is a typical sort of war game, whereas the human fleet, played by Benito, felt like a more traditional moving ships around, trying to overcome my hit points by doing combat damage against me. That is, again, entirely different from what's happening on the land map, where you have land units moving through a terrain, trying to progress towards this main base while the humans are holding them off. I thought this was really, really cool. Daniel, Benita, and I, playing it for the first time, were all pleasantly surprised by this. It is quite long, it is fairly heavy, but I came away very, very intrigued. And the thing I love the most in asymmetric games is both when I felt like I wanted to play my faction again to master it, and I was so deathly curious about everything that was going on with the other 3 factions. I think the thing that's worth saying is this is so specific. Similar to what we were talking about with Stationfall, this is a 4-player only game. I mean, that is not strictly true for Stationfall, but in my opinion, you want 4 or 5 with Stationfall pretty strictly. But Defense of Procyon wants 4 players, no more, no less. And they all have to have some degree of affinity for heavy board games, and especially heavy war games. So it's definitely going to be sort of a very, very niche product. But if you have, 3 other players that you think you're going to be able to return this to the table to on the regular, I would absolutely urge checking it out. Very, very neat game.
So, Neelan, you mentioned that you had some awareness of how your partner was doing things, but really no awareness about how his specific opponent was doing things. And I understand how that helps in terms of allowing you to focus on your own thing and not worrying about too much mechanisms that you don't have to interact with. And obviously, it sounds like you have a very positive experience in general. Did you feel any sort of like, I'm not seeing the entire game thing in doing so? Like, in the fact that you were so disconnected from these other aspects, was that lessening of the experience at all for you? Or it doesn't sound so, but it just occurs to me like something that I might have like a issue with or problem with.
I totally understand why that might be someone's reaction to this. And even your reaction, I could totally buy that, Mark. From my perspective, I knew just enough about how to counter my enemy and just enough about what was happening with Daniel that I could help him out. That really was enough for me, because honestly, knowing more than that would have felt very, very overwhelming. I'd be very interested to like poll Casey on like how she feels she can read the entire board state of the game at this point, having played it more than any of us. But I suspect that comes with more plays, and like, you know, there might be something where Casey might be looking at my board and saying, oh, based on how Nealon is doing, I might have to adjust how I'm helping Benita, say, for example. I was definitely not at that point. Like, I was mostly asking Daniel, hey, you tell me what you think you would most need, and I'll try set that up for you. And I think that's actually in some ways a positive, because it encourages you to talk to your teammate rather than try to read their board state.
Yeah, makes sense.
It makes sense in the context, even thematically, right? Like, you're just on a radio with the ground forces saying, like, tell me what I need, tell me where I can help you. And that was pretty cool. One of the things actually on that one I'm talking about, like, the rules for communication are fully open, so you can't discuss things secretly, which I thought was quite clever. It kind of means you just have to be sort of on the board with everything that you're talking about. Yeah.
It's like, how can you justify this, Nealon?
I'll be honest.
Like, is it 4 times better than... again, it's not a joke. Like, I actually, after you were done playing it, I was like, wow, I want to try this.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, do I want to try this? Like, can I... You know, even root becomes like this harder justification if it's like that, but more. It's like, why? Why we don't just do a thing because we can.
The thing that's really, really hard is I sort of came away from that game almost instantly thinking I need to like have this. And I'll be honest, the second thought that goes to my head is like, no, the best experience I'm going to have with this is playing this again, probably with the same people in a similar environment, right? Like, I cannot justify having this over myriad other games that I would be playing, but I'm also in a very unique position where I have a lot of other games to be able to play. I do think this is for the people that are like Twilight Imperium people, that have these big experiential games that they come together for with a specific group of players on a semi-regular basis. I think this is absolutely going to shine in that setting, but yes, I'm 100% with you. For a large majority of more casual or even just average consumptive gamers, I would think this would be a hard sell for sure.
Very interesting. Yeah, one I would love to get played, but I just wonder how and when.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd super be down to like run you through it at some point in the future, at a future convention or something like that. But yeah.
As they say about the future, it passes us by and is only impossible when you believe.
Exactly. Sherlock Holmes said that.
Before we get to the BGBOB, we did want to announce the winner of the last draft. We drafted the top 700 to 800 games of all time on BGG, and Nealon comes up with just shy of 50% of the vote, 49%, which is an epic victory. Not the most crushing victory, but pretty close. Kellen at 34%. Mark, as expected, bringing up the rear at 17%. You killed it, Nealon. We didn't think you had it in you.
I didn't think I had it in me either. Like, for people that listen to the Off the Record, you'll know that I wasn't optimistic going into this. And I want to caveat that a little bit, which is to say, I'm always playing the best game that I think I'm capable of playing. So, there is some sense that I shouldn't maybe have been surprised I was in the running, but I didn't think by a mile that I was going to win.
I didn't think so either. My God, I don't even know what I'm doing wrong. I have no idea. I thought I had firm footing again, and now I'm back at sea. Like, I have no idea what's going on anymore.
Thank you, everyone who voted in that draft. We have a $50 gift card with someone's name on it, and your email address starts with and ends with R, at gmail.com, and you need to check your Gmail because you have a $50 gift card waiting. Actually, not really. You have an email from us saying, where do you want your $50 gift card to for board games to hook you up. Thank you for playing. We'll do more in the future. Now on to today's featured program. Games where you roll dice We're going to argue them out. Everyone has submitted 5 board games to the list. We're going to pub meeple them and argue live. Cut out all the unfunny bits. Boom, boom, boom. We have an episode.
So basically, no cuts. No cuts then.
Yeah, that's what they call Mark. No cut.
No cut.
No cut Mark.
That's right.
That's a different thing. But let us go on. The first game we will have.
You got to say the rule, the main rule. Come on, Kellen. I know we haven't done it
sorry.
for a while, but the main rule, the number one rule.
I haven't hosted one. You don't let me host these very often.
That's true.
The main rule, I remember. Once you say fire away, your vote is locked in. That is just so that the episode can be like timed appropriately because it's too long.
Branding.
No, that is not
We're
branding.
making faraway shirts. We're making faraway shirts. Tell people we're making faraway shirts.
No one would wear that. All right, so Mark.
Yes.
In one corner, we have the first. This is the first up. We have your game, Tumblin Dice.
All right.
I'll have you know this was also in my 5.
Perfect.
And I have a homemade wooden copy that you don't have, so na. And in my corner, Cthulhu Wars.
Okay.
Tell us why Tumbling Dice.
So I was looking for interesting uses of dice, not just rolling them like you do in Cthulhu Wars, although I like Cthulhu Wars.
You're saying...
What?
Literally,
this is my time,
give
sir.
You
this is my
we
time.
give you a prompt, and your answer to this is, I'm not following the prompt. Did you just say that?
Set order here. This is my time. Anyhow, so tumbling dice is an interesting use of dice because, as the title says, you are tumbling the dice down these ramps. It's like a multi-level board, and you are throwing your dice, trying to have them land in small areas where whatever the die face is multiplied. So you can be safe and just like roll them gently, and maybe you'll land in the 1-time space. And if you roll a 4, that die is worth 4 points. But if you try to get adventurous and try to roll them down one of these smaller ramps to like a 3-time space, and you roll a 5, now that die is worth 15 points. Furthermore, you can also be aggressive, which is what we like here. And if you see Kellen's 6 on that 3-time space and that die is worth 18 points, them and try to, instead of scoring for yourself, throw your die and try to knock Kellen's die out, so you have that aspect to it. So just a fun use of dice. Not the most strategic game in the world, but a really fun use of dice rolling.
All right, so in my corner we have Cthulhu Wars, the quintessential area control dudes on a map game where you roll lots and lots of dice. Those games and their combat systems where you roll 1 dice. I'm looking at you, Root. Those games where you only roll a couple dice. I'm looking at you, Undaunted Normandy. If you want to pick up a lot of dice and roll them and fight, okay? You want Cthulhu Wars. You want it in your life. Every faction in Cthulhu Wars has a custom set of colored dice with claw marks on it for the hits. Cthulhu Wars is a quintessential game that you roll dice. Nothing fancy. I didn't reinterpret the prompt. I just answered the prompt.
What?
I do think the thing that is very striking about Cthulhu Wars' use of dice is that it kind of circumvents kind of exactly the problem that like those games that Kellen was talking about earlier, like Root and Undaunted have, which is by rolling a lot of dice, it's just immensely satisfying. But you're kind of like ironing out probability curves. And I think the thing that's really smart about Cthulhu Wars system is the only thing you need to look for are 5s and 6s. Every single point in time, 5s and 6s, unless you have the fancy dice, of course, where you're just looking for claw marks or what have you. But it's very clear whether a die is a hit, whether it's a pain, whether it's a kill, and you just pick them out of your mess of dice and start moving and killing units.
Now, can I just make a point of clarification?
I think I'm hearing a fire away. There's no clarification.
This is not about the best game that has dice in it.
No.
This is about the most fun use of dice. Fun.
Look, Doug,
you keep reinterpreting the prompt here, bro.
What?
I think. So here's the thing, Mark. I think that Cthulhu Wars is capturing a thing that Kellen's heard me talk about this ad nauseum at some point, but capturing like a joy I had when I was young of like war games. But the thing that sucks about Warhammer is you're rolling the mess of dice and then you're consulting a table.
Yeah.
Then you're rolling the dice and consulting a table. Then you're rolling the dice and consulting a table. In Cthulhu Wars, pick up a big handful of dice, throw them, and activate your results. It's clean, it's beautiful, it's splashy, it's great. Cthulhu Wars, fire away.
It didn't even need to be said. This is over, Mark. Fire away. All right, next up, we have 2 games brought to us by Mark Basada. In one corner, Space Base. In the other corner, Cube Quest.
Cube Quest is what we're calling it now? Anyhow,
well,
okay,
similar to Cuba Libre.
So this is 2 different sort of uses of dice that I really like. So Space Base is a more straightforward use of dice. The thing I like about Space Base is that you are engaged on everybody's turn. So for those who don't know Space Base, basically it's an engine builder, like a tableau builder, where you're getting things depending on what dice are rolled. But as opposed to games where you're only getting things on your turn, you're getting things on everybody's turn on Space Base. So you're always looking at what other people are rolling and you're getting stuff. So every die roll, everybody's turn feels fun. So that's what I love about Space Base. Cube Quest, which is a much lesser game, frankly, but it has one of my favorite use of dice, which is just throwing dice at other dice and just crashing things together. So in Cube Quest, this sort of reminded me of my early plays when I was a kid of, I think it was called like Catapults and something. People who out there may know it. So you basically, in that game, you were building castles and you were using catapults and you would like launch your catapults at your enemy's castles and like destroy them. Literally like blocks were falling apart. We never played by the rules. We just built castles and destroyed them. Cube Quest is the same sort of thing where your opponent is building a structure out of dice. You have your own structure out of dice and you're throwing dice at their structure, trying to get it to topple and trying to hit their king and queen dice or something like that. I remember the game being underwhelming, but maybe that was because I had such high hopes going into it when I read that the premise of the game was throwing dice at other structures of dice. So very fun in concept, not so much in practice, but just I love that use of dice, just destroying things with them. So those are the 2. For me, I would probably go Cube Quest just because it's more novel and more fun. Like, hey, if I'm telling you we're playing a game where everybody's going to get stuff on dice rolls, you're probably into it. But if I'm telling you we're going to build structures out of dice and I'm going to throw dice at your structure, you're going to throw dice at my structure, you're probably more into it. So I'm going Cube Quest far away on this one.
I mean, despite you doing your best to try to convince me not to go Cube Quest, that sounds great. I like the sound of that. I want to play that.
You want to play it until you play it, frankly. But
No, Neelan, you didn't even let me try to convince you. So Cube Quest is an atrocious game. Let's start there.
Sure.
Okay, like
I can see that.
Like literally, Mark is like reinterpreting the prompt over and over again. It's like not let's have fun playing dice games, right? He's like, what if we stacked all the stuff up like a tower and then you chucked it at me? Like we're bowling over here, okay?
Fun.
Bowling
is famously fun.
Yeah, should it be the top game on a top 15 games where you roll dice?
Yes. Frankly, yes.
It should not.
Okay.
Space Base is in a new line of fun games where the dice randomness is you getting to build around it, a la Machikoro. That is a still novel, new way to use dice in a way that works for modern hobbyist gamers, and it should be lauded. Space Base, fire away. If you want to just stack dice in a tower in the corner playing with yourself, vote for Mark.
Yeah, I love the novelty, the novelty, the never before seen of rolling dice and getting resources. I wish more games would allow you to get resources on dice rolls. That's so...
You keep your mouth shut, sir.
I just find it personally really hard to get excited about Space Base. Like, yes, it's better than Machikoro, but like, I appreciate it for what it is. I just can't get excited about it. I know that this is really unfair because I'm basing this against a game I haven't played.
You would rather play Space Base than Cube Quest. I'm happy for you to vote whatever you want, but I guarantee you, if you had to play one 10 times, I personally guarantee that you would rather play.
I would also endorse that guarantee. I am with you that Space Base is by far the better game.
Okay.
No, but what's more fun? I'm
going to give Cube Quest the early fire away. Just on the basis of like we're all having fun. We're still early game.
We're having fun. Let's have fun. Let's not overanalyze.
All right, stop talking. He already fired away. It's over. All right, Neelan is going to talk to us about Dice Forge, and I'm going to talk about Lords of Vegas. Neelan, tell us about Dice Forge.
Okay, so if you're throwing a lot of dice in your game, what could be better than literally building them yourselves? Taking plastic faces and putting them onto the skeleton of your die to make that die better and better and better and better. And you're molding it in a way that's going to roll the way that you want it to in order to fulfill the objectives you need over the course of the game. The toy factor for this is like totally off the chart. These dice are big, they're chunky. You pry out a face and you slap another face in there, and suddenly your die is better than it was before next time you roll it. Dice Forge is so much fun for how kind of silly a game it is, but still the core premise of the building and rolling dice is so strong in this.
What is the theme on this one, Neil?
Oh, it's like arbitrary, magical fantasy.
Yeah, that's the first thing I think of when I think about rolling dice is magic fantasies. Oh, or here, the game I have, conveniently, Lords of Vegas. When you think about dice, I think about going to Vegas, making a pull, rolling the dice, and making some money, okay? Lords of Vegas represents probably one of the most lucky, silly, fun, hobbyist game experiences that you can have with your clothes on. This is one of those sentences where I didn't know how it was going to end when I started it. Lords of Vegas is fantastic. This is my favorite dice rolling, and I can't even exactly remember how it works, but when you restructure a casino is made up of multiple players' dice, and if you're not the mob boss of that casino because you don't have the highest dice, you can like reorganize or restructure, which involves just picking up all the dice and re-rolling them and hoping that your dice comes out on top of the other one. And it's such because someone can have one worker in there and suddenly become the boss of that casino. Hilarious. You can also use dice in this game to gamble at your opponent's casinos and take their money from them. So when I think about fun, interesting dice mechanisms in board games and rolling a lot of dice, I think about Lords of Vegas. I interpreted this prompt very literally. Which games is it fun to roll the dice in? That is Lords of Vegas. Fire away.
I'm going to say that I wish there was a little more dice rolling in Lords of Vegas. Like, I know the restructuring thing. I know they go to other opponents' casino, but I found them to not happen as much as I would have liked. But when they do happen, they're super, super fun. So I'm going to go Lords of Vegas, fire away. I found Dice Forge, the dice creation, to be a little more cumbersome than I would have hoped. But I do like it. I do think it's a cool use of dice.
All right. Mark is going to tell us about Dungeon Fighter, and then Neelan is going to tell us about Eclipse.
Okay. So for my money, Dungeon Fighter should be number one on this list. This is the most fun use of dice rolling of any game out there. And it's not, the other thing is that it's a cooperative experience. This game has given me, and I've mentioned this before in previous episodes, more like everybody standing at the table cheering than almost any other game. For those who don't know, it's like a dungeon crawler co-op game where you're trying to go through a dungeon, you're getting loot, and you're fighting monsters. And the way you fight monsters is that you are bouncing dice onto this target that is in the middle of the board, and the closer you get to the bullseye, the more damage you do. I've played this a number of times where we were like fighting the last monster, or we were fighting a monster, we were down to our last health, we had one more person with one more die, they needed to hit a bullseye, and everybody standing at the table, most of us thinking that it's not going to happen because you roll one or two per game maybe, and then they roll the bullseye and everybody cheers, and it's just fantastic. I love everything about the dice rolling in this game. I think it's super, super fun. So Dungeon Fighter for me, number one on this entire list probably.
So Eclipse appropriately arrives at a time where I've already talked about the joy of rolling lots of dice and the joy of building those dice out into the dice pool itself. That's what Eclipse is all about. You're customizing your ship. You're deciding what sort of dice are you going to be throwing when you put the ship into battle. Is it going to be the orange missile dice that roll before the rest of the dice, or are they going to be the other weapon types? The way that you build your ships in Eclipse determines which dice you're throwing, and the number of ships in your big massive fleet determines how many of them. It goes similarly to Cthulhu Wars. You just pick up this mess of dice, throw them all, and pick apart the results to see like what's hitting, what's missing. And the scale of these battles when you're throwing these massive dice is just fantastic. And knowing that is all predicated on like how you specifically constructed your fleet is something I particularly love.
Neelan, you should be ashamed of yourself trying to tie in Cthulhu Wars with Eclipse there to try to get Kellen's vote. That is a low
I
move.
would never do such a thing.
Kellen, if you're going to pick Eclipse over Dungeon Fighter, I will be so ashamed. Eclipse over Dungeon Fighter?
I actually can remember dice rolls in my games of Dungeon Fighter. I remember them with elation, so I feel like I have to vote for it. It is stickier in the memory banks.
Wow.
Also, I've never played Eclipse, but who cares? Dungeon Fighter, fire away.
Nice.
All right. Neelan is going to tell us about Formula D, and then I'm going to talk about Las Vegas.
So completely pivoting in the other direction from rolling a ton of dice, in Formula D, you're only ever rolling one die. But the thing that makes this so excellent is the gearing system in Formula D. So you have a number of dice of different die face counts. So they give a D6, a D4, all the way up to like a D20, or I think it's even a D30 for the highest die. And as you're going up through the gears, you're rolling the bigger and the bigger and bigger dice. So there's just something that's so fun about getting to the point. It's like, oh man, guys, I'm rolling the big blue die, and you'll just whip it across the table, hoping it lands on like as high a ridiculous a number as possible that no one's ever even seen a number that big in a game of Formula D so far. And then it has all the highs and lows that might not even work out, because while you might be in a high gear, that die still has really, really big swings. So even though it's going to average higher, the throw of the die is still very, very tense. It's one of the only good roll and move games that I can think of. It's come back into my mind recently because of like some similarities it shares with the way that it handles cornering, as does Heat. Formula D is very, very fun, and I think the way that it uses dice to like create that racing game system is really, really cool.
Okay, there's a lot of pitches for Las Vegas, right? And I don't even have to use the theme, because if you look at images of Las Vegas on BGG, every image has dice in it. If you look at Formula D, I can't even find one. And I feel like I could rest my case right now. But in Las Vegas, what I like about it is when I think about dice games, I think about games where you're handed like your color dice. And I believe you get 8 dice each turn on this that are your color. So the box, when you open it up, you're just looking at 32 plus for a 4-player game. You roll all of them, and then you have to assign all of one number value to a different casino that you're playing in. I think this one is a bit underrated. I know it has been redone as Las Vegas Royale. I think it's just a smidgen too long. It's one twist too long. And I think that if this was 20 minutes shorter, it would be like in the top 100. And as it stands, it is in the top 500 and totally worth your time. Tons of dice. You're rolling them every turn. You're deciding what to do. A very good game, Las Vegas.
I think Las Vegas is the better game by far, but you're talking about fun dice rolling. Formula D for me on this one. You shift in the 5th gear, you roll that 30-sided die, you get that 30 and you're just flying down there, or maybe you've rolled too high and you're spinning out, whatever. Kellen just mentioned stickiness of memories. I have sticky memories, shouldn't have said that, of Formula D, whereas I remember enjoying Las Vegas way more than Formula D, which I don't really like that much. But the memories, there's no adhesive in the memories, unfortunately. So it is Formula D far away.
How many games even have 30-sided dice in them?
Good question.
All right. Someone is going to tell us about Martian dice, and then someone else is going to tell us about Can't Stop. I can't remember who submitted what. So please speak your piece, and please provide your apologies for whoever provided Martian dice for this list.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Martian dice. I got to admit that I knew it would be a tough challenge when I put it on the list, because it's not exactly setting the world on fire. It is a game that is just a pack of dice with different faces on it. The thing I like about Martian dice, and other games do this, is that it is sort of Yahtzee style, as opposed to Yahtzee where you can only roll the dice 3 times. You can re-roll the dice here any number of times. The thing I like about this is, in Martian dice, you only score if you roll equal to or more Martians than tanks. But the thing about Martian dice is whenever you roll a tank, which is the bad face, which is the face you don't want, it sticks, it stays. And so you're only sort of like pushing your luck against yourself in a way where, you roll a number of dice, you get 4 tanks, for example, you can keep any one type of dice. So in the game you score, I think it's like cows, humans, and chickens or something like that. So if I want to score all my chickens, I can keep all the chicken faces and potentially score them, but I'm pushing my luck that I'm going to, by the end of my dice rolling, make sure that I have more Martians than tanks. So yes, I'm going to allot all those dice to scoring, which is great, but I'm taking them away from the aliens that I'm going to need to overcome the tanks. So it's that you're playing this against your opponents, but you're also playing against yourself. Like, how much do I want to push my luck? I only rolled 1 tank, so that means I'm maybe more free on this roll to keep more dice for scoring. But then on the very next roll, I rolled 3 more tanks, and now I'm in big trouble because I don't have very many dice to roll in the future to, fight off these things. I like that very simple Yahtzee style, keep the bad faces, and then sort of figure out how you're going to deal with them as you go on.
I think that push your luck is one of the best use cases for dice, and I don't have to have played Martian dice to know that Can't Stop is a better push your luck game. Can't Stop is the brilliance of working with what we all intuitively know about like dice probabilities, but still trying to defy the odds. It's like, yeah, you can go down the rolling sevens on 2 dice as much as you want. We all know that's going to happen more than not, but that path is longer. So am I going to go down that longer path and hope I'm going to be able to like stick that further before someone else beats me to it? Or am I going to go down the harder path? I'm going to commit to going down the 12 path, which means I know I'm going to roll that path less, but if I can get there just before Mark gets to the top of the 7 path, oh, that feels so good. That feels so great. And that's Can't Stop in a nutshell.
How could you, Nealon? Okay, because I'm the one being swayed here, right? You forgot a component of it, which is to thank
Sid
the
Saxon.
master, Sid Saxon. You didn't say it. I don't understand.
I didn't need to say it, Kellen. You and I, we both know Mr. Saxon and all his games.
I was going to jump on Nealon. I thought it was going to come for sure. I was like, Nealon's going to mention Saxon because he knows it's going to win Kellen over if he mentions Sid Saxon.
I have not played Martian dice. I know I've played zombie dice quite often, which I think is just a take on the same system.
Probably, yeah.
But this is like back in the day. I don't know who you're trying to win over.
I know. Like I said, I knew it was a tough sled by putting it up here.
Tough spot. Can't stop. Fire away. All right. We have Fuse in one corner, brought to us by Mark Basada. And in my corner, we have the most recent game on the list, I believe, Gangs of Dice.
Okay, so these are 2 similar games. The thing I love about Fuse is it is like concentrated, frantic dice rolling, a co-op game where you're trying to achieve certain die faces and die colors themed around this like bomb defusal thing. And so it's like a game of like frantically passing these cards along and rolling dice and trying to roll before the timer goes off. There's like a timer that you could have on an app that ticks down in the background. So it's, for those who haven't played it, you probably already know what it is basically. One card may ask you to stack dice of like lesser and lesser values of different colors, and some cards are going to have you roll 4 dice of the same number, and you're just trying to achieve all these like little mini games before the time runs out in a co-op fashion, and it's just like frantic crazy, all done in like 10 minutes or whatever the timer is. So Fuse has always been a fun game to break out people who aren't into board games because it's like co-op and crazy and fun.
I just don't, Mark, it's like you're obsessed with
fun
finding out games that use dice, but like you like rolling them isn't that important, or that it's like everything else you could do with them but roll them.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't get it. So I'm bringing to the table, Reiner Knizia does Yahtzee.
Oh, okay. Very novel. We're talking fun here.
Listen, this game comes with 36 dice, right? 36 mini dice, and it comes with like 40 tokens that represent 3 dice each, right?
See, I think the problem is
imagine if it
Knizia
had all those dice.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could afford it. That would be 150 dice in one box. That's Gang of Dice.
Knizia really let you down by just having these tokens representing 3 dice each. What is that? What's he scared of? Why not just put all the dice in there?
This game is fun because you are trying to roll a certain amount of dice, and rolling more dice is better, but you might pop, you might lose, so you have to sit and try to use more dice than the last person. Dice are flowing around the table. It's not real time because no one likes real time games. That is Gang of Dice.
I gotta be honest, Mark, like I struggled for a long time at the top of this episode to try to think of what real-time game I wanted to include on this list. Fuse was in the contention. I don't think rolling dice in real time is fun. I think by design, right? It's frustrating. It's infuriating. I have not played Gang of Dice, but a Yahtzee was basically on my short list. So if you're telling me that this is...
Oh my God. Okay,
I'm
Yahtzee is on your short list?
I think
Yahtzee's
great.
Yahtzee would be 10 spots higher than Martian dice.
Real-time dice rolling is not fun.
That is my take. I'm sorry.
Well then I'm doomed. This is the crowd I'm working with. I'm doomed.
I'm going to say Gang of Dice. Fire away.
For what it's worth, I really like Gang of Dice. I played it for the first time at Dice Tower West and really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, nice.
Oh, you did play it?
Yeah. I thought it was great.
Oh, that's great.
I think it was great.
Yeah. I thought you guys would like it. Awesome. All right, so returning for the first time, Cthulhu Wars, but fighting Nealon's Quarriors.
So yeah, Quarriors is a little spoken of Eric Lang joint is effectively sort of Dominion, but as a dice game, where you're building up your dice pool, you're spending the currency that you roll on dice to buy more dice to add to your bag, but the dice that you can buy kind of have different faces on them. So you might buy a red die, which is maybe better for getting currency, or a different colored die that has different abilities associated on it. And you're buying those dice, adding them to your pool, which leads to one of the most sort of like pleasantly tactile things, which is fishing into a bag of dice, grabbing 6 of them and then rolling them to see kind of what your spoils are based on what you've assembled. I think this is quite good. I'm kind of surprised that it kind of like fell out of vogue. Because I remember at the point in time where it was new, I felt like a lot of people were playing this. That is Quarriors.
Oof. This is a tough one, Mark, right? Because when I think of quintessential dice games, like Quarriors does come to mind, but it like is fallen out of the milieu. And when I think about Cthulhu Wars, it's not as much of a dice game, but it is like by far a better game. So it's a little like it fits the prompt better, but it's very hard to be like, and what's the deal with these games like Quarriors and Kubitos where they just like around with the letters to make it hard to pronounce?
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm really disappointed in Eric Lang for copying John LeClaire's Kubitos gameplay style.
I was torn actually between like having Quarriors or Kubitos because they are like very similar games. I think the purity of Quarriors just being a pick up and roll dice game is kind of what won out for me of the two of them.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, I love Cthulhu Wars. I love the dice system. I love the tactility of just rolling a big loaded dice. This is tough for me because I do like the idea of like a bag builder or deck builder with dice. That's interesting, and it is fun to like reach in and grab different kinds of dice and have different sort of powers activated. I think I'm going to lean Cthulhu Wars on this, but it's very, very close. So Cthulhu Wars, fire away.
Cthulhu Wars, fire away. All right, now we've got Tumblin dice in 1/4 and Quarriors. Things are going to start speeding up. Tumbling dice, Quarriors.
I think Kubitos and Quarriors is fun, but it's a little too mechanical. It's not that like viscerally as fun as Tumblin dice, so I'm going to say Tumblin dice, fire away.
Yeah, we don't even need Nealon in this one. Like Tumblin dice, very high up for me in the sense that this list is about rolling dice and what do you do in the game but roll the dice. So stick to the prompt, tumbling dice, lock it in, fire away. All right, Mark, defend Cube Quest against Lords of Vegas.
Very easily
here, bro. Very easily?
Yes. Lords of Vegas, you're rolling dice a couple of times, way less than you would think of in a game called Lords of Vegas, frankly. And Cube Quest, again, let me just say, you're building things like structures made out of dice, and you're throwing dice at them. That is fun.
Cube Quest is literally like a rule set for children. It's like you're playing in the sandbox with your toys, and Cube Quest is trying to put that in a board game box.
Maybe we should be more childlike, Kellen. You ever think of that?
No, we forsake the youth.
We grow up too fast.
Peter Pan was wrong.
Nealon, you're building castles out of dice.
Look, I love the sound of Cube Quest. I will happily play this at some point. But Lords of Vegas, I think, has to win. Just by the pure basis of how well it leans into like everything it's aiming for thematically.
This is not about the best games. This is about the best use of dice.
You're the...
You rolled dice like 6 times.
Now it's about the prompt. You were the first one to be like, I didn't listen to the prompt.
Following the prompt.
Play the tape back.
Since before the prompt was even put down.
The first description you gave was, I'm not listening to the prompt.
A game where you roll dice called
All right, you're not allowed to talk anymore. Cube Quest on one side, Dice Forge on the other. Let us continue this argument.
Okay. Do you want to make dice? Or do you want to smash dice against other dice?
Dice Forge, fire away.
Oh my god. You guys are so unfun. It's just...
Nealon?
I was with you on Cube Quest, but I have to give this a Dice Forge. Don't rope me into the unfun argument. I want to smash dice together.
No, you don't. I will let you. I gave you many options, many opportunities to do so. You're not doing it.
Formula D on one side, Dungeon Fighter on the other.
I like both these games for dice rolling fun. But I stand by. I think Dungeon Fighter should be at the very top of this list.
Yeah, one of the things that I sometimes do when submitting my games is leave off games I know we're going to be on like your guys' list. Dungeon Fighter is a lock for this list as far as I'm concerned.
They're very similar because they have like a lot of stand-up moments, both of these games. But,
sure, yeah. But Dungeon Fighter is fantastic and one of the best uses of throwing dice, really. I mean, like a game that uses special abilities as to how you throw the dice. That's great.
And the fact that it's co-op, I think, really helps, because in Formula D, when you're standing up, it's usually for yourself, but in Dungeon Fighter, everybody's standing because you're all grouped together.
All right. Dungeon Fighter
fire away.
is Formula D versus Eclipse. Okay, so this is my question, right? Because I have not played either of these games. But I find that when you open a board game box and there's one die in the whole box, that's a bad sign. I see that as a bad sign. So you're saying Formula D, there's one 30-sided die. That's the game.
No. So in Formula D, you have a bunch of different dice for each gear ratio. Yeah.
Got it. But there is a 30-sided. Okay, that could sway me over Eclipse.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, just to like put my cards on the table here, like it's Eclipse fire away for me. Like I think that it gets to the visceral nature of throwing dice that I like, but with some intelligence behind the dice you're throwing.
I'm Formula D far away. Fun. I'm Mr. Fun.
Yeah, Mr. Fun. Can I secure a vote in the future if I vote for Formula D? Because I don't give a about which one of these.
Okay, but what is the vote for? I'm willing to bargain, but I don't know. I don't even know.
I can cash it in whenever I want. That's the difference.
I refuse.
All right, Eclipse, fire away. All right, on one side we have Gang of Dice. On the other side we have Can't Stop. This is a battle between Sid Saxon, who is dead, and Reiner Knizia, who is alive.
Who's almost dead.
Oh, this is a toughie, but it's got to go to Can't Stop, a stone cold classic dice game from Mr. Sid Saxon. He's like closer to my heart. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know.
Reiner just keeps going. Sid Saxon is dead.
Reiner Knizia just won't die.
That's right. This is close for me, but I think it's recency bias. I think Can't Stop is probably the winner.
All right, we got to move. Gang of Dice versus Martian Dice. I don't know if Mark put one on here just so it could be number 15.
I was just using fun. I'm trying to get fun dice uses here. You guys are going with Eclipse and Lords of Vegas and Cthulhu Wars. Let's have some fun.
Gang of Dice.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Gang of Dice, fire away.
Martian Dice versus Fuse. All right, here's where you could get me.
Okay.
Fuse is real time, which is bad. And it's co-op, which is also bad.
I just don't understand how you guys don't like rolling dice real time.
Martian Dice, fire away.
I'm saying Fuse, fire away.
I'm going to say Fuse, fire away, because I know that I've had fun playing Fuse, but I don't know anything about Martian Dice. Fuse, fire away.
And Nealon notches his first mark on the fun side this entire recording.
All right, on one side we have Lords of Vegas. On the other side we have Cthulhu Wars. So there isn't enough dice rolling in Lords of Vegas. I haven't revealed it until now that I agree with Mark to some extent. There's a lot of dice on the board.
Mark has just collapsed head in hand.
Listen, I know how close we are to the end, so I feel like a cheat code. Because I can start revealing things it doesn't fucking matter anymore. Yeah. I have to give it to Cthulhu Wars. I think it would be a shame if Cthulhu Wars won this whole thing.
Yes, I agree 100%.
No. But Cthulhu Wars, fire away.
I'm doing Lords of Dice out of spite. Okay.
All right, Lords of Vegas versus Tumbling Dice. My brother made me a very heavy wooden tumbling dice set, custom. Okay, the box itself is wood. Okay? I love my brother, but this thing is 50 pounds.
I've not played Tumblin Dice that much. I think I've only ever played it at Chuck's, where it's a regular fixture of their dexterity section. But I've enjoyed it all that time, and I think it very much gets to the heart of, like Mark was saying, you're just throwing dice, and that is the game. Tumblin Dice, fire away.
Tumblin Dice, fire away.
I'm actually going to say Lords of Vegas, but I know my vote doesn't matter. Lords of Vegas versus Quarriors. Lords of Vegas. There's just no way. Quarriors is just not... It's not worthy. In this sentence.
I think it's Quarriors for me. Yeah, I mean, I think it is. It's Quarriors, fire away. I like Lords of Vegas, but I think it's Quarriors, fire away.
I'm gonna do Quarriors, fire away.
You're just trying to with me right now. All right, Can't Stop on one side, Dungeon Fighter on the other.
Oh my god, I can't believe this is going to go the way I know it's going to go. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. You're going to say Can't Stop is more fun than Dungeon Fighter.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
I mean, look, Mark, I'm in your corner on Dungeon Fighter. I love that game. I think that is going to be in the top 5 on this list, and deservedly so. But Can't Stop, as a game that is quintessentially about dice and everything that dice represent and is the best version of that,
It's fun. It is fun. The push your luck is fun. It's fun. It's a great design. It's just like, it's like mathematical and dry in some way. I don't know. I'm going to say Dungeon Fighter Fire Away.
You could roll the dice in Can't Stop as if you were playing Dungeon Fighter. Like blindfolded,
Over your
under
shoulder.
your hands
Sure.
with your non-dominant
And that would make
hands.
Can't Stop more fun.
Can't Stop, Fire Away.
Can't Stop, Fire Away.
Right, Dungeon Fighter versus Gang of Dice. I'm willing, right, to betray Reiner Knizia, who is alive, in order to vote for Dungeon Fighter this time. I like Dungeon Fighter. Listen, the thing is, it's just a little like, there's too much, it's like, oh, your HP, your blah, blah, blah. Too much RPG in my dice throwing.
You have 5 health or 6 health. It's like, you're not tracking 100 different
I
things.
can't manage that. Dungeon Fighter, Fire Away.
Dungeon Fighter Fire Away.
All right, Gang of Dice versus Eclipse. All right, Nealon, I need the one sentence sell here. It's almost like Eclipse is your favorite dice,
Yeah,
in a
it's
combat
my favorite
thing.
dice combat system. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
It's strategic dice combat building. Like, do you go heavy into throwing your dice before the other player? Do you go heavy into, like, combating their specifics of their fleet? Like, what are you building your fleet around? What are you building your strategy around? What are you building your dice pool around? And then you just get to roll a ton of them.
I think it's got to be Gang of Dice, Fire Away. I listened. In my defense, I listened.
Oh, tough. This is tough. I'm willing to go Eclipse Fire Away.
Well, you're just...
Thank you. Eclipse, Fire Away.
Gang of Dice or Formula D?
Formula D for me. More fun.
Gang of Dice, Fire Away.
Formula D, Fire Away.
Gang of Dice versus Las Vegas. I think it's Las Vegas for me. This is like seriously
Sure.
probably my number one when I think of this.
I'm willing to go
Las
there.
Vegas.
Okay.
Can't Stop or Cthulhu Wars. Listen, there's only 4 dice in Can't Stop.
And none of them have slash marks on them. Whatever the hell.
Yeah, none
Whatever
of
the hell
them
you're
are-
using to fight for your game, they have slash marks on the dice. My God.
All right.
I don't
But
think
it's-
you would have to really convince me that hard to go Cthulhu Wars on this, to be honest.
I'm going to say Can't
Oh,
Stop.
really?
I'm going to say Can't Stop.
I think it's Can't Stop, and I love Cthulhu Wars.
Okay.
Can't Stop, Fire
I'll
Away.
let you guys take it then.
Cthulhu Wars or Dungeon Fighter? All right, here is where we're going to have an
My
hour-long
goodness.
discussion.
My goodness.
Cthulhu Wars. Are you kidding me? Cthulhu Wars, Fire Away.
Not the better game, the more fun use of dice. Yes, you get to roll a bunch of dice, but you've rolled a bunch of dice a million
Not
times.
fun
in your life.
use of dice. Otherwise, your precious Biblios would be in here.
That's true. Let's put it on. It's new edition.
Rewind, yeah. No, I think this is Dungeon Fighter for me.
Okay. Cthulhu Wars versus Eclipse. All right. Well, to me, this is Cthulhu Wars, but that's just because I haven't played Eclipse. I'd be happy to try Eclipse and curious how it resolves itself.
I think they're so close, but Eclipse is my preferred of the two.
I'm going to go Cthulhu Wars on this.
Okay. Eclipse versus Tumbling Dice. Tumbling Dice to me is like super high up in this as games where you roll dice that are fun. Eclipse has been described to me as a Euro game, so I'm not even sure how the dice got here. So Tumbling Dice, Fire Away. Eclipse versus Quarriors.
Eclipse for me.
I'll go Eclipse here.
Right? Quarriors versus Formula D. Gotta be Quarriors.
I go for
You-
Warriors for me.
Nice. Formula D versus Lords of Vegas.
Formula
Lords
D.
of Vegas,
Formula
Fire
D.
Away.
You actually roll dice.
Lords of Vegas versus Las Vegas. It's gotta be Las Vegas.
Battle of Vegas.
Gotta be Las Vegas. What?
I said Battle of Vegas. I would actually go Lords of Vegas here because just the thematic part of it. Las Vegas is probably a better game structurally, but it's like not as fun. It's not as like Vegas-y.
This is hard because I've actually never played Las Vegas, so I think it's just Lords of Vegas by default for me, really.
Okay. Las Vegas versus Dice Forge. To me, it is Las Vegas.
I'll go Las Vegas on this.
Okay. Dice Forge versus Gang of Dice.
Dice Forge.
I'll go Dice Forge.
Okay. Gang of Dice versus Cube Quest.
I just want to hear Nealon's answer this.
Cube Quest, fire away, baby.
God. Cube Quest. Finally, some fun in this goddamn list.
All right. Gang of Dice versus Space Base. Coming back from the dead here to try to redeem itself.
All right, what was the first one?
Gang of Dice.
Gang of Dice.
By Reiner Knizia. Gang of Dice, Fire Away. Space Base versus Fuse. Space Base easily Fire Away. I would rather play Space Base.
This is so mid. Fuse, fire away.
Fuse, Fire Away.
Mark? All right. Space Base versus Martian dice. Let's talk about low.
God.
We're past mid. We've blown past mid. It's low. And that is Martian dice. Space Base, fire away.
All right, Space Base.
All right, we're done. We are done. We have a ranking. We have a ranking coming in at number 15. Mark drafted it for this specific reason to be last place. Martian dice. 14, Space Base. 13, Fuse. 12, Gang of Dice. 11, Cube Quest. 10, Dice Forge. 9, Las Vegas. 8, Lords of Vegas. 7, Formula D. 6, Quarriors. Seriously? 5, Eclipse. 4, Tumblin Dice. 3, Cthulhu Wars. 2, Dungeon Fighter. And the number 1 by the Stone Cold Sid Saxon himself, who is dead, can't stop.
I totally disavow this list.
Beautiful. Where does it to be?
Sad. This is a sad state of affairs.
I think that my Vegas votes sort of split themselves. If I would have only had one Vegas in there, both of those deserve to be in like the top 5. That is going to do it for the episode. If you want to hear what we actually think about this, subscribe to the Patreon, where we'll go off the record and tell you how we really feel. You can find more of Board Game Barrage at boardgamebarrage.com. You can check out our wiki. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can talk to us in the Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Thank you to you all, the listeners. Thank you to Heart Society, who is dead, for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album, Wake the Queens. So long and good night.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. So completely in pivoting in the other direction from rolling a ton of dice, in Formula D, you're only ever rolling one die. But the thing that makes this so spectacular, spectacular is maybe a bit strong, but the thing that makes this so excellent, sorry.
You're going to cut that part out?